The most powerful warship on Earth is loose in the Atlantic. The German battleship Bismarck wields the firepower to crush any ship in the Allied fleet. The British must call on courageous airmen, flying outdated swordfish biplanes to help hunt down Hitler's superweapon and pound her into oblivion. May 26, 1941. For 30 hours, ships and planes of the British home fleet have scoured the North Atlantic for some sign of battleship Bismarck. But Bismarck has simply disappeared.
We're very despondent. Everybody, and I mean everybody, from the lowest boy to the highest officer on board was in a terrible state because we had lost the Bismarck.
Aboard Bismarck, the crew hopes by morning to be within 200 miles of France, waters controlled by the German Luftwaffe. Desperate to re-establish contact, Fleet Admiral Tovey dispatches Catalina flying boats, or PBYs. They're American aircraft, lend-leased to Britain to support the war effort. Their incredible 2,500-mile range makes them ideal for long-distance searches. They comb the seas for hours. Then, at 10:30 a.m., 36 hours after losing her, a PBY crew spots a dull black shape moving across the water. Bismarck has been found. Bismarck has been spotted here, 700 miles from the coast of France. Admiral Tovey's battle group is here, 130 miles directly north. Tovey must slow Bismarck down to get in range to strike. In perfect position for this mission is a task group steaming in from the south, known as Force H, which includes the aircraft carrier Ark Royal. May 26, 1941, 7 p.m., 8 hours after finding Bismarck, 15 Swordfish torpedo bombers from Ark Royal speed toward the German battleship. Lieutenant John Jock Moffat pilots one of the ferry Swordfish.
We were told to go in there and do our best and get as many torpedoes into her as we could possibly do.
Moffat and his crew break through the clouds and descend on their target.
My first impression of the Bismarck, when I saw it on my starboard side about 2 miles away, it was really awesome.
Moffat's flight of 3 Swordfish close in at 115 miles per hour.
6,000 feet, all of a sudden, all hell was let loose.
Bismarck's anti-aircraft gunners desperately filled the sky with flak.
I had no doubts about what was going to happen, and I was scared stiff. I thought the only way I could survive was to get as low as possible. And the nearer I got to the ship, I was hoping that wouldn't be able to get their guns down low enough.
Moffat closes to within 2,000 yards and prepares to launch.
There was a voice suddenly says to me, "Not yet, Jock." And this was my observer. And I thought, what's happening? And he kept saying it, "Not yet, not yet." And then out of the corner of my eye, I happened to turn slightly to the right, and there was a friend of mine hanging outside this aircraft with his bottom in the air, but I don't know how he did it, in fact. But he was leaning right outside the aircraft with his head right underneath the fuselage. And he was shouting, "Not yet, not yet." And then it dawned on me why.
In these high seas, Moffat's observer knows that if the torpedo hits the top of a wave, the impact could veer it off course. With only one torpedo, he has to make the shot count. He hangs upside down, judging the wave height, waiting for the right moment.
If you could release the torpedo that went into a trough of a wave, then you had a chance. And that's when he said to me, "Let her go." And when I said, "Let her go," he said, "Jock, we've got a runner."
Bismarck makes a hard turn to port to avoid the torpedo. It's a fatal miscalculation. 51 seconds after Moffett launches, the deadly missile strikes Bismarck's port side on her stern. The violent explosion tears a huge hole in the hull. Air power has demonstrated its supremacy over the mightiest warship. The British surface fleet closes in for the killing blow.
Finally, there's an opportunity to avenge the Hood, and the British go into action confident that they can achieve this.
On King George V, Fleet Admiral John Tovey plots his tactics. His plan? Force the cornered German ship to divide its fire against multiple targets. Then turn his ship's broadside, unleashing massive firepower. Battleships Rodney and King George V speed to within 12 miles of Bismarck. At 8:47 a.m., Rodney's 16-inch guns fire. Then King George V. Shells rain down around Bismarck. The British crew stuff cotton in their ears to deaden the sound. Their throats sting as they breathe in the cordite fumes after each salvo. The desperate German battleship strikes back.
Ludgen's first act was to open fire on the aged battleship Rodney. It's been suggested by some that, like Hood, he saw her as an older ship and thought, perhaps weaker, he could take her out and lessen the odds against him.
Both sides miss their targets. With each salvo, the gunners adjust their rangefinders. With her rudders jammed, Bismarck can't maneuver. She's an easy target. Rodney scores the first hit on Bismarck at 9:02 a.m. The British have the range and let loose with everything they have.
We were firing broadside. We were firing 10 shells at a time. 10 14-inch shells were going all over. And that's a hell of a lot of shells for one ship to take.
Two British cruisers, Norfolk and Dorsetshire, join the fight. Bismarck is being pummeled from all sides.
Ich kann nur von dem Endkampf erzählen, dass wir nur ab und zu.
Shell splinters rained through the air ducts that supplied our fresh air. The shells were hitting us fast, violently.
Then, King George V's 14-inch guns make a critical hit.
In dem Moment ging eine Granate.
A shell hit the gunnery control and also the main battery. The men screamed because of all the sulfur steam. It scalded them terribly.
Bismarck is now a slaughterhouse. The huge dreadnought fires a final salvo, but at 9:31 a.m., her mighty guns fall silent. October 25th, 1944. American pilots from Taffy 3's small carriers take flight in a desperate attempt to stop the Japanese center force from annihilating their ships. These fighters and dive bombers are armed for ground attack and anti-submarine duty. their weapons are virtually useless against the giant Japanese ships.
Many of them armed with nothing other than depth charges or machine gun bullets, in some cases almost nothing at all. And their job is to bear down that center force and do something, anything, to prevent their carriers from being run down like dogs on a highway and slaughtered by these massive ships.
Lieutenant Richard Roby flies with a division of FM-2 Wildcat fighters from the escort carrier Gambier Bay. The 24-year-old pilot maneuvers his fighter through a maelstrom of flak.
You don't get scared. You get scared afterward, not during.
Roby noses over from 1,200 feet, strafing Japanese destroyers with his .50 caliber machine guns.
I aimed at the torpedoes, which are midships, because if I put the torpedoes out of existence, that put them basically out of existence.
Soon, sister escort carrier groups Taffy 1 and 2, located 30 miles to the south, scramble their Wildcats and Avengers to assist. By 7:15 a.m., hundreds of Allied aircraft fill the sky. Their courageous efforts succeed in forcing the Japanese ships into defensive maneuvers. This break in the attack allows the destroyers Hole and Heermann to launch torpedo strikes. Heermann's torpedoes miss their intended target, but streak toward Yamato. The Japanese flagship turns hard to avoid the incoming threat. From the cockpit of his FM-2 Wildcat, Richard Roby spots the retreating Japanese flagship and moves in with his .50 calibers.
I started shooting at the anti-aircraft positions on the foredeck because they're unprotected. They're just out in the open. But then eventually I got to the point I couldn't bear on them because I was too low. That's when I shot at the bridge. I stopped firing because I ran out of ammunition.
Surprisingly, after the air and torpedo assault, Yamato does not rejoin the fight. But Kurita's center force still wields plenty of deadly firepower. At 7:35 a.m., the tiny American destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts enters the fray. She heads out on a torpedo run towards the heavy cruiser Chokai. Under cover of smoke, Roberts advances to within 2.5 miles of Chokai.
We could see his two front 8-inch gun turrets turning toward us. And I swear to God, it looks like he was coming right between my eyes.
Chokai fires 8-inch projectiles, each weighing nearly 300 pounds. But Roberts has moved so close, the Japanese cruiser can't train her guns low enough. The shells fly overhead. Roberts sends 3 24-foot-long Mark 15 torpedoes knifing through the water at Chokai. They score a direct hit on the heavy cruiser.
We didn't know any better, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. We were cheering like it was a baseball game.
Then, Roberts lashes out with her only remaining weapons.
We started now dueling with them with our 2 5-inch gun. That's all we had left. A 5-inch shell would bounce right off their hull. So our 2 gunners were aiming at the upper works.
For 60 incredible minutes, Roberts slugs it out against adversaries 10 to 30 times her size. She fires more than 600 rounds of 5-inch ammo. But at 8:51 a.m., Roberts shudders under the first of several devastating hits.
We took a salvo of 6 8-inch shells on the gun that's like mine up front, only in the back, 40 millimeter back. When the smoke cleared, We found out through our gun captain that 42 gun is gone, disintegrated, gone. We knew all our shipmates. I knew two boys pretty close in that gun back there. And all I could do was think of those guys. They're gone. And that's when we knew that this is it. This is a fight to the finish.
In a furious last stand, the Roberts aft 5-inch gun, the only one left, sets the cruiser Chikuma's bridge afire and knocks out her number 3 gun turret. Moments later, 3 14-inch projectiles from the battleship Congo impact the Roberts. A 40-foot hole is ripped open on her port side near the waterline.
You could drive a semi-truck through there. And we're taking on water, tons of water were going in. Somebody yelled down, "Abandon ship! Abandon ship, every man for himself."
At 9:35 a.m., Usen and his shipmates abandon ship and pray for rescue. 30 minutes later, Samuel B. Roberts, the courageous ship known in Navy lore as the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship, slips beneath the waves. 89 sailors go down with the ship. The tin cans of Taffy 3 are succumbing to the withering firepower of the Japanese Armada. Now, the light cruiser Yahagi leads 4 destroyers on a torpedo run against the crippled flat tops. The only American ship in position to stop them is the battered USS Johnston. The Johnston opens fire with her few remaining 5-inch guns.
Anytime we could get keyed in on something, we fired. And we kept firing as long as we could possibly could.
Captain Evans orders Johnston to proceed full steam ahead, attempting to cross the T on the Japanese column. Crossing the T is a classic naval tactic, where a ship crosses in front of an enemy so she can fire all her guns, while the enemy can only fire its forward armament. But before Johnston can fully cross the T, Yahagi unexpectedly turns sharply to starboard. The destroyers follow.
All of a sudden, they start turning one after another. Well, we had an idea then that something was up, and it was probably a torpedo type, but their position was so bad that there was an element of doubt.
The Japanese fire their torpedoes. The Japanese Type 93 Long Lance is one of the most successful torpedoes of the war. With a maximum range of 20 miles and 1,000-pound explosive charge, it could sink a warship with a well-placed hit. As with all torpedoes, speed, range, and running depth must be preset. But the Johnston has caused the Japanese to fire prematurely, before making proper adjustments. The torpedoes miss their mark. Again, Johnston has saved the carriers, and again, she pays the price. The 5 Japanese ships bear down on the lone destroyer. Johnston staggers fire among her attackers in a desperate but futile attempt to stave off the inevitable. At 9:10 a.m., a deadly fusillade rakes the ship.
That really turning point was the gun 52 was hit, which was right and direct to the bridge. Well, it killed practically everyone in there, set 5-inch ammunition cases on fire, clouds of smoke.
Finally, Johnston's damaged engines falter and quit. She's dead in the water. Enemy destroyers encircle the crippled ship, firing relentlessly.
The ship was just taking so many hits that they couldn't patch the holes fast enough, and just impossible to keep her afloat.
At 9:45 a.m., 2 hours and 45 minutes into the battle, Captain Evans gives the order to abandon ship. 25 minutes later, the Johnston sinks beneath the waves. 186 of her crew are lost. But incredibly, Johnston and Taffy 3 have achieved the impossible. Admiral Kurita has signaled the 20 undamaged ships in the center force, return home. Thanks to the determination and courage of the American sailors and airmen, MacArthur's invasion force at Leyte is saved. The battle is over. David has felled Goliath. Kamikaze. A terrifying weapon conceived in desperation. Japanese pilots committed to an unthinkable mission, a violent end as a human bomb. Now, through startling computer animation, an unprecedented view of these suicide attacks. On deck with horrified American sailors. And inside the Kamikazes cockpits, as suicide airplanes and rockets hurtle towards oblivion. April 16, 1945, the destroyer USS Laffey, accompanied by support ships LCS-51 and 116, is patrolling waters 50 miles north of Okinawa. The ship is on radar picket duty, a new defensive tactic that positions a ring of destroyers around the main invasion force to create an early warning system against incoming aircraft. Laffey is manning station number 1, the closest to Japan. The last 4 destroyers to patrol this area were slammed by kamikazes. Ari Futridis is a 19-year-old quartermaster on Laffey.
We knew that being the first in the line of defense was dangerous, but we didn't realize to what extent.
At 7:44 a.m., radar picks up a solitary Val dive bomber 6 miles out, approaching off the port bow. Laffey's 5-inch guns quickly open fire. At 3 miles, the Val jettisons its bomb and turns away.
Probably came in just to look over the situation and then took off.
Then, at 8:29 a.m., a swarm of 50 Japanese planes appears on the horizon. The attackers circle ominously, like vultures. The USS Laffey is about to face the most unrelenting kamikaze attack in history. Al Doris watches the terrifying procession from his 40mm gun mount.
Well, they were just about every place you looked. You know, you could see a Japanese plane.
Suddenly, 4 Vals break formation and bear down on Laffey.
They were coming in low on the water, and somebody on our gun said, well, here they come. They're coming now.
2 head for the starboard bow. Captain Julius Becton orders Laffey to come about, hard left 30 degrees, to bring all his guns broadside to the attackers. Laffey unleashes an anti-aircraft barrage. First, the main battery, 5-inch radar-directed guns.
And then they get in a little closer than the 40s. And they get a little closer, then the 20 millimeters will start rattling at him. We just try to stop them as best we could.
Laffey splashes the first two attackers, but the other two Vals wheel around to come in from the stern. One Val sheds pieces of fuselage until its fixed landing gear catches the water. Tracers converge on the second Val. Laffey is barely spared a moment's respite before a Judy screams in from 90 degrees to starboard. Judys are a fast dive bomber, top speed 340 miles per hour. But this one's heading in at a poor attack angle. All of Laffey's guns can train their fire on the Kamikaze. But immediately, another Judy barrels in on the opposite side. The destroyer's top speed is 35 knots, and it can turn sharply. Captain Becton orders 30 degrees hard right rudder.
This diving Judy was also strafing with its guns, trying to take out personnel on the command bridge. And so we had briefly a two-way gunnery duel between an oncoming kamikaze and the defending gunners.
The Judy is no match for Laffey's main battery. The aircraft disintegrates. But its bomb detonates in the water, spewing killing shrapnel over exposed areas of the ship. Planes are coming in from every angle, using specialized tactics developed over months of experience. USS Laffey has taken repeated kamikaze hits, and at least 30 Japanese planes are still waiting to pounce. Now, not a moment too soon, Marine Corps F-4U Corsairs scream in.
We looked up and saw them. Well, that took a lot off of us because they kept them busy from then on.
The F-4U Corsair was one of the most advanced naval fighters of the Pacific War. Its distinctive bent wing derived from the clearance needed from its huge 13-foot propeller. The shape also reduced aerodynamic drag.
The Corsair had a clear advantage over any Japanese aircraft. High speed, tough, very maneuverable, take a lot of punishment.
Time and again, the Corsair pilots risked their own lives, chasing the kamikazes down through Laffey's unceasing anti-aircraft fire. One is hot on the tail of a Ki-43 Oscar.
This Japanese plane was coming in, and the Corsair come up underneath of him. Tried to raise him up to get him away from the ship.
The Oscar shears off the port yardarm. The Corsair hits the ship's radar antenna and careens away, badly damaged. The courageous American pilot manages to bail out. Suddenly, a Val looms menacingly towards the bridge, Ari Futridi's battle station.
It was very vivid in my mind. There was a huge bomb under his belly. And as he approached, the bomb got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I really felt at that point that I was going to be a statistic.
But at the last second, gun mount 52 traverses from port to starboard.
He hit the plane directly on the nose, and it disintegrated. That I remember very vividly.
Finally, the 22nd and last attacker, a Judy, streaks in. Corsair blasts the Kamikaze before it could strike the ship. Now, only the roar of the Corsair's 2,000 horsepower engines fill the sky. After 80 minutes of non-stop combat, 6 kamikaze strikes and 4 bomb hits, incredibly, Laffey is still afloat. Of a crew of 355, 32 men have died and 71 more are wounded. But the destroyer will survive to fight another day.